Hi, Sophia.
Hi.
I'm so happy to have you here today. We have an amazing guest today. Sophia's going to be talking about some really juicy topics, and I'm really excited to talk to her. But of course, before we start and before I get into who Sophia is, we're going to start with our little opening meditation. And today I'm going to invite you to drop into your breath. This interview will be posted next week, so which is the middle of summer, and it's time to slow down a little bit for us and to just be in our body and be in that slow moving as the heat helps us to move. So if it's safe for you to close your eyes with your activity or just stop for a moment, whatever activity you're doing, we'll all close our eyes together and we'll take a cooling breath. And a cooling breath can be done a few ways. This is also a way to calm pitta nature, or pitta is the fire element. And so in the middle of summer, it's really good to bring that cooling energy into our body. This is also really good for if you're feeling angry or agitated or annoyed, just to help the inner world cool down a little bit. So this completely depends on your genes. It's a genetic thing whether you can or cannot do this, but there's two ways to do it. So the first way is to curl the tongue and stick out the tongue slightly and curl the tongue. And if you can't do that, you push the tip of the tongue against the inside of the teeth. And so either way, you're creating this tube with your tongue. And we'll just take 4 cooling breaths, just like this. So do the tongue position that works for you. And we'll inhale for a count of 4 and exhale for a count of 4. So let's begin by pushing all of the air out of our lungs and then breathing through the tongue. Just as if you're sipping the cool air into the body. One last big breath. And then we'll take one big cleansing breath, which is a big inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And just check in with your body and see if you can invite your body to slow down a little bit. Invite the nervous system to slow down a little bit and just rest in this time of year, which is so nourishing. It's when all the big summer crops start to come in. It's when the heat of the day makes us feel lazy. It's when we're outside in the sun absorbing that vitamin D. Those fresh early morning walks and those evening walks as the heat of the day starts to dissipate. All those really beautiful, sort of more luxurious things in our life. See if you can bring that quality into your body and into a part of the body that might be feeling a little bit tight or tense or overwhelmed by the busyness of this season. And if you need to take a couple more cleansing breaths just to allow some of that tension to dissolve, I invite you to do that. And if not, just breathing regularly and allowing the body to soften. Wherever you are, just take a couple more breaths, really savoring this pause in your life, this sacred pause. And we'll slowly open the eyes. And as we open the eyes, I invite you now to look around your space, allowing the head to follow the eyes, and just notice the area that you're in, taking in your surroundings, and again, allowing the nervous system to settle. This is called orientating. And coming back to center. Wonderful. Well, like I said before, I'm excited to have Sophia Treyger here with us. She is the radical pleasurist. I call her the radical pleasurist because I haven't met another woman with that title yet, and it's very true the way she lives her life. She is an intimacy coach and a relationship empowerment expert, teaching women how to shift from pleaser to pleasure, which we're going to get really deep into in our conversation today. And she does this, she empowers women to do this so that they attract and allow themselves to receive the best in their life, whether that's romantic relationships and their soulmate, or abundant opportunities, a close-knit sisterhood. She is a master of creating safe space for women to engage intimately with themselves and with each other. She teaches women how to give to themselves first. Such a big thing with us women are learning to do, especially right now. She's also the founder of the Intimate Sisterhood and Women's Soiree, which are amazing events for women in the Portland area. And she has a signature program called the Radical Pleasure Program, which we'll learn about later. So thank you, Sophia, for joining me today. Sophia and I met through a practice that we both hold very dearly to our hearts called Soulsara, which is an amazing practice. And we are going to be interviewing one of the teachers of Soulsara soon, Carrie, who is a mutual friend of ours. Yes, we both talk. That's where we met. We met as assistants to Soulsara, and since then we've just been playing with each other, engaging with each other in women's events and with many other projects. So welcome, welcome, welcome. So happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Is there anything else I missed or that you'd like to add to your basket of goodies that you do?
I think that you were very good at introducing me. Thank you. It's always fun to hear what it sounds like when somebody else says it. Instead of just writing it out and, sending my bio off. So thank you for putting such loving intention into introducing me and having me. And I love that we're friends and that we met at Soulsara. And like you said, it's so, so dear to me. And Soulsara is a huge reason that I can even show up and do this work. So if you haven't checked that out yet, everybody, Soulsara.
Yeah, we'll do a little plug for Soulsara. It's the practice of opening. It's based on communication and also connecting from your authentic self and really exploring those parts that like to hide. And it's done in groups. And they do residential retreats, and they also do work, sort of the weekend immersion in Eugene and Portland. They have intro nights. There's lots of ways to find them. Soulsara is it .net, I think?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. SOLSARA.net.
Yes. So yay. And we're going to dive into Sophia's story around how she went from pleaser to pleasure. And I love how you've created that little tagline, pleaser to pleasure, because I really believe that when we step out of becoming this pleaser, we really do get to experience so much more pleasure in our lives. And it's kind of this epidemic that I see with women. I know myself, I still work with that. It's still a practice I have. It's so easy for us to step into that sort of caring, take care of others before self place. So how did you come to this? How did you come to this? And what's your story from being pleaser to stepping into a life of pleasure?
Well, as you may not be surprised, it was an evolution and a long process, lifelong. And in the past few years, as I stepped into being an entrepreneur, of all things, right? I have a background in therapy and I've gotten therapy and all that stuff, but being an entrepreneur has been this hugely enlightening endeavor and process. And I'm the kind of person that I cannot teach anything that I don't embody. And I have taught in that way before, and it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. It's not pleasurable. It's not exciting for me. And I think that me and a few other inspirational women and men, whether I know them or not, have shown me that I don't have to live a life that is hustle, where I have to work hard or put in ridiculous amounts of effort or force anything in order to have what I want and manifest what I want. So I've always felt that way, but coming from an immigrant family, there's this very strong work ethic, and I am so grateful to my family for all that they've done to make my life and my brother's life great. So I think my story really lies in being a serial monogamist and having relationship after relationship after relationship that were pretty toxic for me, some abusive. And after many, many years of stepping into a more mindful space through meditation, becoming a yoga teacher, there's so many pivotal moments in my life where I had opportunities to continue to awaken. And when I would look back, the common theme was these relationships that I was having with men. And then, of course, I would look around and it was relationships I was having with friends, relationships I was having with my family. The pleaserhood extends to every aspect of life. But the wounding comes in my relationships with men that I've had in the past, romantic relationships, where I was definitely not showing up as myself. I was always taught to suppress who I am. I was told I was intense. I was told mixed messages, but mainly I was told that I must be a certain way or I won't be accepted or loved. And so I really took that in, even though I'm a feminist and I'm very aware and I think I'm very powerful, but I still had this shadow, this aspect of me where I was not vulnerable in relationships. I was really just a big pleaser. I would do whatever it took to have someone like me, be with me. I wouldn't be argumentative. I was really withering away in every relationship, and it would be the same thing over and over again. And it culminated in, this was a few years ago, in the highest cost of being a pleaser was I was with a man. We were together for some time, a couple of years, and I found out I was pregnant. And for me, I was 34 years old, and I was ecstatic, absolutely ecstatic to learn that I'm going to be a mother. It's something that I've wanted for a long time. And through a very weird, challenging, dissociative thing that happened to me, fear took over, inner critic took over, and this whole must fix everything, very masculine space, must please this man, can't have him be mad at me or whatever. I'm sure a lot of women will relate to this in one way or another. I ended up having an abortion. I chose to have an abortion. He didn't want to have a child, and I chose him instead of having a child, and ended up breaking up with him not that long after anyway, and went into a huge, overwhelming grief process once I allowed myself to feel again. And the grief still arises, of course, and I've had so much healing with so many different people around it. But when I look back, this whole language of pleaserhood came to me just this year when I looked back at my life and realized, oh, that's what I was doing. I was in this deep space of pleasing everybody else, my parents, my boyfriends, and it came at a very high cost. So I'm hyper aware of that in myself. I am happy to say that in the most obvious in most ways, I'm not a pleaser, but there's these like subtle ways that still pop up that I'm aware of. I'm like, oh, well, there it is again. And quickly shifting out of that into, well, what is it that I desire in this moment? That's a question that I ask over and over and over again all day long.
Yeah, beautiful. I think, your story, I mean, I'm sitting here going, yeah, I've been there very in different ways. but I totally relate to this. And it's a conversation that I have with my own clients or just friends and women in general. This it's an interesting thing. I think it comes from a really beautiful place too, of wanting, the feminine essence is to nurture, to care for, to do whatever it takes. That mothering essence that we have within us as women is like, I will lay my life on the line to take care of my children, that sort of energy. And it also leaks out into ways that we can learn how to use that to try and get people to, like, quote unquote, like us or love us, or, a lot of things that it's just really funny. I'm just having, like, when you were talking, I'm having all these like flashes in my mind of like, oh yeah, that I did that. And I'm like remembering all of these ways with my family, with my partner, my current partner, how I'm trying to, we're evolving that in our own relationship right now. It's been a couple years of evolving it because it takes practice.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a huge topic. So what, I know you had that pivotal moment of like, whoa, this needs to change. What am I doing? And you said you ask yourself, what is it I truly desire often? But what are some other things that have helped you shift out of this pleaser into experiencing pleasure? That pleasure aspect I want to hear more about too.
Absolutely. I'm going to say this over and over again, and I say it over and over again, is to continuously get into my body. And that's a huge practice. And it's been this journey from living in a very masculine space, which masculine is amazing. That energy is wonderful. I can't do anything without it. And in fact, the protectiveness that women have is, I believe, a masculine space. So I'm stepping more into this very trusting, receptive, surrendering space. And that's where pleasure lies for me. And it's extremely challenging because I am all about doing and planning and being in control. So moving to Portland in 2014 was huge for me because the energy here is very feminine. It allows me to just continuously go into my body. And so I have a lot of different practices and tools that I use and teach my clients on how to get out of the thinking aspect of yourself and into the feeling aspect of your body, into the feeling of your breath. And that's where it's at. And also teaching women, encouraging women, helping women allow themselves to feel again, feel their emotions, because that's something that women avoid, are afraid of, don't know how to do. So the pleasure lies in feeling. Pleasure lies in being in the moment that you're in right now. There's no stress, there's no anxiety, there's no depression, there's none of that in the present moment, unless you're feeling depression isn't an emotion, but the emotions, if you're feeling depressed or you have an experience of depression, could be sadness, it could be anything. So it's really getting in touch and developing a vocabulary for what you're feeling in the moment. And even when I'm experiencing physical pain in my body, I can still find a part of my body that feels pleasant because it's moving all the time. It's coming and going all the time. Meditation has been really big for me. I meditate pretty much every single day, even if I'm not sitting on a cushion. Meditation to me is checking in with my breath, seeing what it's doing, seeing where it's going in my body, seeing where it's being blocked, and if I want to, actively changing that. That's really it in a nutshell. Pleasure is being in the body, being in the moment. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman.
Yeah, and we talk in somatic experiencing, we mentioned a couple times that if you're in anxiety, you're in the future. If you're in depression, you're in the past. And depression, from one teacher I've studied with, is he believes the lack of the ability to be able to grieve what has passed. And so when you speak to that piece of depression, it absolutely lands for me that also when we're experiencing really someone who has depressive tendencies, myself, and has struggled with depression, it is really hard to be in the moment and feel the heaviness, feel the grief, because grief can be so overcoming. And I also know when I really go into my grief and allow my whole body to experience that, like you said, from a body place, I do find pleasure in that. There is some part of me that's like, oh, it feels really good to grieve this and let it go. And what you spoke to, I think, also speaks to how feeling the unpleasant emotions that are maybe harder for us, there's some pleasure in that. I mean, I don't know if for me, I was more of a fighter for sure. I have that tendency to want to defend myself a lot. And sometimes, I would find pleasure in being a total bitch. And I don't practice that anymore, but there's still that pleasure of like, oh, I'm defending myself. I'm standing up for myself right now. So it's absolutely true that you can find that pleasure there. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. I encourage every single woman that I encounter, whether it's my sisterhood, whether you pay me or not, that you get to express every single goddess that exists in the world. And I talk about that a lot too. It's what goddess wants to be expressed or is being expressed today. And I'll tell you what, when I allowed myself to express my anger is a really big emotion in my life. And it's a really huge one in other women's lives because we tend to suppress it. Mm-hmm. I unleashed that shit. And you know what? It was scary.
Yeah.
It was scary for me. And it was scary for, my last partner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when I look back at it, I have zero regrets. I have zero guilt about the way that I expressed because it had to be expressed that way. And for me, it was progress. When a woman expresses her anger, I feel like that's progress. And I'm not talking about going to the deep end of violence because that could happen too. Mm-hmm. But this might sound unpopular, but when that happens, I guarantee that is not a standard for that woman. That means that she has to express that somehow and then come to a place of, okay, how can I express that in a way that is still honoring myself and other people? Mm-hmm. If the pendulum swings towards aggression, I don't think that's a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Because women don't commit the kind of harm that men commit anyway. Mm-hmm. And if that's sexist, if it's a double standard, I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that could be a whole nother podcast. We could unpack that for sure because it is a huge place. And as women, it's our nature to feel a lot. And so our emotions are stronger. They are bigger. They are more intense in their nature. And my pendulum did swing towards the unhealthy. I call it more like unhealthy aggression and healthy aggression, because healthy aggression is something our society, especially in women, do not know how to access on a really like passionate level even. And I swung the other side of that pendulum, the unhealthy aggression, for years. And it was necessary for me to take back that sense of control of self.
Exactly.
I've been so violated. My sense of control was not even there.
Yes. Yeah. And thank you for expressing that, Kelsey. It needs to happen. Mm-hmm. I don't judge it. There's no right or wrong to it. There's no shame in it. I talk about it, how I've been aggressive towards partners. It's this swinging, and then you come to the middle. As long as we're doing our work, right? We have to do our work or play. I don't even like to use the word work. We have to play with all these emotions, all these goddesses that express. I love Kali, love Durga, love all the fierce goddesses that help us. And I'm encouraging one of my clients right now to be in conversation with Kali because it's coming through her big time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I talk about when we do sort of unleash that and we cause damage, we need to clean it up. We make mistakes, and when we make mistakes and we hurt people, even if we don't mean to, or even if, I mean, I've definitely had moments where my colleague comes out in an unconscious way and I'm watching myself like spew poison everywhere. And there's another part of me going, whoa, what are you doing? You need to stop. And I can't stop because it's been so held down. And then after, I need to clean that up. I need to take care of my partner a little bit more, give him a loving massage, say I'm sorry. But that doesn't mean that I should hold back in that moment either.
Absolutely.
Because you're right, it does come to that middle place. Eventually, you come to that middle place and it's not so explosive and it's not so damaging because it has been explored and you do know now how to work with it if you are doing your play. I like that here. Playing with those aspects.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yes. And again, thank you for saying that, because as the true goddess owns her shit.
Yeah.
She takes responsibility for what she does, what she says, how she radiates energy out into the world. Mm-hmm. And she also forgives herself. Mm-hmm. She does not blame, does not criticize. And again, that's a process that I take my clients through, is this forgiveness and not blaming and being gentle and saying, okay, I did that. It wasn't the best me. It wasn't the highest self, but I did it. And I'm going to own that. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to move on from that. The moment has passed. I'm going to move on from that and make sure that I'm aware of that. And there was another thought I had and I completely forgot. Yeah, the owning is really important. Oh, right. Mm-hmm. One thing that I really want to mention is that as women, one of the first steps is to first acknowledge that we have boundaries. Mm-hmm. I know for a long time, I didn't even have any boundaries. So I didn't even realize when they were being violated, or if they were being violated, I'd go off the deep end before I can even acknowledge that. So I'm thinking of one client in particular where she's telling me stories about men consistently violating her boundaries. And I'm not talking about even in a physical way. I'm speaking about in an emotional way, in a spiritual way, where they're just not honoring her no, because she's saying no now. Mm-hmm. Because when she started working with me, now she's saying no. And I know that in my life, it's this consistent violation of boundaries, whether men know it or not. I don't know. I can't speak to their experience. But the consistent violation of boundaries leads women to go to the deep end. Like, you know, and I don't want to say causes, because we are sovereign of our own experience, but if a woman doesn't have the tools or doesn't have the fierceness or the strength or the courage yet to know when to walk away or cut the person out energetically, physically, then there's this constant violation of boundaries that's happening, and it becomes very traumatic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such an important piece to touch on, because I noticed in my own relationship, you know, being with a man now for almost 8 years, 3 or 4 years ago, I started going, whoa, wait a minute. I am not being heard here. And I'm saying no. And I still wasn't being heard. And it was really because I didn't have that fierceness or that courage or that absolute clear, fuck off, this is my boundary, underneath me just being able to say no. So I'd say no, and I feel like it would be clear. I'd say, no, that's not okay. But I didn't have that push out from the center of my core, like, here's my boundary, don't you dare cross it, even though I didn't say it that way. And he couldn't recognize it. One, because 5 years before, I had been not really even expressing my boundaries. I didn't know where they were. I didn't know it was okay for me to have them. I didn't know what that was like. So he was 5 years into a relationship with a woman who didn't have boundaries. And then all of a sudden I'm expressing them, but I'm expressing them from this place of like, really, it was more like, okay, I'm expressing a boundary. Please honor that. I don't know if you're going to, but I really want you to, like, feeling versus like, hell no, there's my boundary. Don't you dare cross it. Yes. And now that we're getting to that place, there's fast forward 3 years later, he's still learning how to navigate now, because I am fierce with my boundaries, and he's still like, whoa, I'm not used to that. And it is, the masculine nature very much in general, I don't like to generalize, but generally the masculine nature is direct, it's on it, it knows what it wants, it knows how to get it, and it just goes. And so when there's a boundary there, if it's not clear, it's just going to keep going until there is that boundary. Mm-hmm. And it is such a hard dance to navigate. And when you are in relationship with people and all of a sudden you're creating boundaries, I feel that more often than not, you do need to express your no in a really fierce way for people to hear you at first. And then you can sort of pull it back in a little bit. Because otherwise, if you're known as someone who doesn't have boundaries and all of a sudden you have boundaries, people aren't necessarily even going to take you seriously. And that's just the way it is.
Right.
They're not used to it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And thank you again for mentioning that, there is a grace that comes when you're starting practices, especially in partnership, when you're starting to do something different. And one of two things happen. One, the other person hasn't done their own work or isn't doing their own play. So they're not riding the wave with you, and that relationship is going to end. Or they're recognizing, okay, they're grateful. They're like, okay, I'm seeing these boundaries. It's challenging for me. I'm not used to it, but I'm on this journey with you, which it sounds like your partner is.
Yeah.
Thank Goddess.
Yeah.
and you navigate together. And there's really those two. Yeah. I'm not black and white about things, but I've worked with enough women, especially women who started off in partnership when they started working with me, and did those partnerships not because I told them to, but because their partners could not hang. And that was okay. Like, that was their choice. They did not, for whatever reason, they were not congruent with what was happening with the women. And that to me is a victory, because it's okay. It's totally okay. And I've also worked with women who are married, who their marriages were falling apart and their marriages strengthened.
Yes. Because
the women became more vulnerable, more intimate and trusting of themselves, and more vocal and intimate with their partners.
Yeah. And believe it or not, when you can tell a man, hey, this is what I want, or this is my boundary. I know Lee, my partner, he loves it. In some instances, he might be like, whoa, what's going on here? But then after, he's like, damn, that was hot, you know what you want. And that's like really helpful for him, because then he's not left questioning, right?
Yes. Yeah. Men like to know what's up.
Yes.
They're pretty literal.
Yes.
So it is a really great quality, while at the same time, leaning back into our femininity and being like, okay, I've made my statements, and now I'm going to lean back. And then you get to decide how you want to play with me.
Yeah. And I just want to also point out here, we're talking about men and women, but there is, in partnership, whether same sex or not, there is a more feminine essence identified person and a more masculine essence identified person. And so it doesn't matter what your gender is, there's still these roles that are being played, and we're not necessarily talking about man, woman, we're talking about masculine, feminine, which is quite different.
Yeah.
One of the other
things to happen.
Yeah. One of the other things I'd love to dive into with you, I'm just sort of taking a little step into another direction, but based around the same thing, because I think this plays into it. I am also a recovered love and sex addict, and I know that we've talked about that before. I would love to talk a little bit more about that, because I feel, I think there's sort of AA type groups out there for love and sex addicts. Like, it's a big thing now. It's actually being recognized that we can become addicted to this, just like any other substance. And I feel that it's an addiction that is not talked about or really even acknowledged, unless you've seen a show that talks about it, or your therapist brings it up, or it's just not out there like any other addiction is. So I'd really love to talk with you about that too, and your sort of journey with that and how you recognize that it was an addiction.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I would love your thoughts on it as well,
Mhm.
because I've been challenged about even saying that I've been a sex addict or a love addict. The way, and again, there was this just kind of like awareness one day a few years ago where I was like, I think I'm a sex addict. Um, and I had to look back at my life because it was this like lifelong process again of being a serial monogamist. But
Mhm.
when I looked at the pattern and the cycle of being with men and not being with men and then being with men, because I've broken up with every person I've ever been with.
Mhm.
Um, and what I realized, and it happened when I started meditating, because when I started meditating, I chose to be celibate, to be off. I was never a heavy drug user, but to get off marijuana, to get off alcohol, because I wanted to see what it would feel like to not have anything um, lubricating situations for me. And I was surprised, but I was very uncomfortable. I didn't think that they had a role in my life. Um, and it's not like I couldn't go without sex, but I definitely started feeling this craving if I didn't have sex for a long time. And what would happen, the way that it showed up for me was I would have a craving for sex, and it's not, I masturbate, it's not that, and I can achieve orgasm, it's not that. Um, what I was craving was touch and affection and emotional intimacy and all the other intimacies, including sexual. So what would happen, and I think this is just an ingrained social thing, that the only way that I felt comfortable having sex was if I was in a relationship. So after a long time of not having something, being deprived of something, even though I chose it, pretty much any man who came along who showed me affection, love, attention, that was the drug. And I would hook, line, and sinker. Wouldn't even know the person. We'd start having sex, and of course, the oxytocin, emotional stuff would come in. I think I was really addicted to that more than anything, that the serotonin and the pleasant sensations of it all,
Mhm.
without really understanding that that was what's happening. That was what was bonding me to this person. And then after that wore off, and I realized, oh, we're not actually compatible. And I would try to like make the relationship work by being a pleaser, which it's all still being a pleaser, because I use sex as a way to be in relationship, as a way to be loved, as a way to have the touch and affection that I wanted, because I didn't know, I had no idea that I can get touch in many different ways from my friends, from men non-sexually. I didn't know. I only thought, well, if I'm with a man, that means we need to be having sex. And after doing that for many, many years, that becomes a pattern, a very ingrained pattern.
Mhm.
And it's still challenging. It's still really challenging for me to catch myself and be overwhelmed by sexual energy. That's why I have I do a visualization around sexual energy, because if we can be aware of sexual energy and how we can move it intentionally in our bodies, then it doesn't have to be expressed through our genitals. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to lead to orgasm. Orgasm is awesome, but that's really not the end all be all of sexuality and connection.
Mhm.
I was very masculine about it. I was very goal oriented. I was like, I'm going to have sex. I'm going to be with this person. I'm going to be really good at it. I'm going to please them. I'm going to make sure they don't leave me, all subconscious stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm going to make sure I have orgasm, because that's really important. That's what bonds me. If I have an orgasm, I'm bonded
Mhm.
to that person. Um, and it started to shift again with all the mindfulness practices that I do on a daily basis, where I check in with whatever I'm feeling, whether it's with a man and I'm attracted to him, or with anybody. I even check in with myself when I am masturbating, and am I in my body, or am I checking out? Am I in fantasy world? Am I watching porn? What's happening?
Mhm.
Can I continue to be in my body and feel my body and feel the pleasure and the sensations, regardless of whether I have an orgasm or not, or move away from being so rigid about it and just experience myself. So that, I believe, helped me move out of the habit and the addictive pattern.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing so openly around this. I love having these conversations, especially these are the conversations I feel like we as women need to be having more of, and talking about how to feel our body. For me, it was a little bit of a different story. I feel my it stemmed from the sexual abuse I had as a child and getting that kind of attention from men. And I learned quickly as a young teenager, I lost my virginity very young, that is what men want. They want this sexual energy. And for many reasons, I was wanting that masculine presence in my life. And I realized, oh, this is how I get it. This is how I feel wanted. This is how I feel loved. So I was very promiscuous, loved having sex, was great at it, could pretty much turn on that sexual energy and use it and manipulate situations to my advantage anytime I wanted to. And in that moment, I remember looking back as I started exploring this after, I realized I had that awakening of like, whoa, this is an addiction. There was something about in that moment and being wanted and nothing else was happening. Like I was the only person that man wanted. I was the only thing that mattered in that moment. And that maybe, and it wasn't me, it was like my body obviously and just the act, but it felt so deeply intimate and so deeply connected, and I felt so loved, or what I thought love was. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did for years. I went between periods of like sleeping around with guys. I'd have these like 1-2 week flings, or having a partner. And as soon as my things got hard with my partner and that sort of oxytocin phase wore off and our shit came up, I'd be like, I'm out. This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't love. This isn't, and I was really addicted to that first interaction, those first few moments where it was so intense. And when I finally met my partner that I'm now with for 8 years, and we connected on so many other levels, and he was able to show up when my shit was up and be like, no, you're not going anywhere, and I'm not going anywhere. And that could be a whole nother story, but I then also for me to be in that place, to be promiscuous, I had to be under the influence. I never did it sober, because when I was sober, it didn't feel real to me. It was always after a few drinks or when I was high and when that stopped, when I became sober from hard drugs and my alcohol addiction, I think 8 or 9 years, 10 years ago, when I stepped out of that, I'm still working on how to access that part of me that loves sex, that loves being wild and loves being just that in that raw sexual energy without substance. It's so hard for me to access sometimes. I have to work at it. And the mindfulness practices, the breathing, having a partner that's willing to talk about these things and to connect with me and to work with me around it has been so helpful. I don't know if I would have been able to do it on my own. I think I did need to have a partner to work through that with me, because I was also really good at masturbating and loving myself when I was on my own. And it was literally that interaction with another that I had to look at. So it is, I'm sure you have things to add to this. I'd love for you to hear what you have to say around that.
Yes, it's so resonant for me too. You touched upon, I was using sex to numb pain. So if something wasn't going well in the relationship, I said, let's just fuck.
Yeah.
Let's just have sex. Like I don't even need to look at that now. And that's what I was doing. So I wasn't allowing myself to feel discomfort, to listen to because that's my intuition coming up. I wasn't allowing myself to listen or feel anxiety. I have tried to avoid feeling uncomfortable for my entire life up until now. Up until a few years ago, I was like, nope, I'm going to feel everything now, everything. So once you can feel everything, you don't have an addiction anymore. It doesn't have a hold on you because you can feel everything. So I was definitely using it to numb pain, to numb discomfort. I mean, truly, I feel like it was a drug, because I was like, oh, I'm just going to continue to feel good all the time, whether it's masturbating or with a partner. I didn't need substances, but that was my substance. It's like, don't want to look at this. Let's have sex.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm very sensitive to energy. And I realized in the past few years that I can't have just anybody in me. So I can't even have sex with anyone, really. It's not pleasurable. It's just not. I need to feel mutual respect, admiration, and love, whether I know you 5 minutes or 5 years. It doesn't matter. I need to feel that in my body, even if we don't have a long-term relationship. I'm exploring my own sexual empowerment right now because I'm feeling that craving. I'm feeling the craving to be touched. I'm feeling the craving to express sexually. And I'm being bolder about that and asking that from certain men in my life. Because if I wait again until I'm in a long-term relationship, that's when my judgment gets blurred. Because I'm like, oh, I want this so much. I don't care who shows up. I don't care who gives me attention. So I don't want that to happen anymore. So now I'm in the space of like, okay, how can I get what I need intimacy wise, sexually, physically, spiritually, emotionally, all that. And not necessarily attached to being in like a long-term partnership. And I do want to meet my soulmate, of course, and I'm open to that. But I'm detaching from that outcome and just being with men who I love and respect me. And playing, exploring our bodies together. And I find that to be really important. And it's not about intercourse for me anymore. That's boring. That bores me. I really want to feel my body in the presence of somebody.
Yes. Yeah.
And not check out and not go into orgasm space. So yeah, having somebody who can hold that space in a strong way, a man who can hold that space in a strong way, is necessary for me. And it sounds like it was necessary for you too, because that's where you practice.
Yeah.
So I love the men in my life who have that presence where I feel so safe to say exactly what I need, what I want, to say no, to change my mind. I love it.
Yeah. And that is a really raw place to practice boundaries, to be in the middle of having some intimacy and having that fun on whatever level, and to be able to go, whoa, wait, this is not okay for me right now. I have this coming up, or this isn't feeling good, or wow, I want more of that. That's the most raw place we can practice our actual boundaries. And it is so healing to have someone to be able to practice those boundaries with, who will really honor and respect that. And yeah. Wow. So you mentioned that you have visualizations and you have all this work that you do. And I know that you have gifted our guests a few goodies that I will have links for on the blog with all the show notes and everything. But I would love to hear about how, if people resonate with what we're talking about and your work, where they can find you, what you do, what you offer. I feel like we've had like mini snippets of like 3 different extended podcasts that we could episodes that we could do in our one conversation, which we will probably do. But I'd love for you to tell us about where we can find you and what you have to offer.
Absolutely. Well, what I'm offering all of you is an audio of a visualization where you can learn how to play with and use your sexual energy to your benefit any way that you want. And it's so powerful. It gets you so anchored into your body. I'm so excited for you all to try it out, and please let me know, let Kelsey know how it goes. I love hearing from you all. So that's one, you're getting that. And also I'm extending empowerment calls to the first 10 women who sign up. And these are, if anything that we've talked about really hit home for you and you're saying, wow, that's something that I really want to look at, I want to learn more about it, this is what the empowerment call is about. It's identifying that space in you that's stuck and you want to shift from pleaser to pleasure in a particular area in your life. For a lot of women that I work with, it's in the sexual realm and it's in the relationship realm. So you come away with tons of clarity. It's my absolute pleasure. I can do these all day long. I just don't have a huge amount of slots on my schedule, so I'm extending it to 10 women. And you just schedule, and there's a link that Kelsey's providing for that. So get on that. And my absolute other love, and it's a huge part of, it's a pillar of my life and business, is sisterhood. We inspire and come out of the abusive relationships and the toxicity when we are not only in community, but when we're in intimate community, when we are showing up authentically as ourselves, as women, and witnessing each other. Women are afraid of each other. That's what I hear. That's what I found. That's what I've experienced in my life. And we bring each other down so much, and it breaks my heart. So I have the Intimate Sisterhood on Facebook. It's a closed group. It's private. Nobody sees posts, and there is magic happening in that group where women are being so vulnerable and talking about what's really going on in their lives. And these are prominent women in my community, and they feel safe to talk about what's happening in their lives so that they can give to themselves first and then serve their community. So the Intimate Sisterhood is my heart. It's so important to me. And if you're in Portland, I have in-person women's gatherings called the Women's Intimacy Soiree, and that's coming up at the end of this month. And any way that I can connect with you, whether it's online or offline, it's my pleasure.
Beautiful. Thank you. So we'll have all of those links that Sophia offered on our blog. I want to thank you so much for joining us today and having such a rich and juicy and yummy conversation about so many great topics. I can't wait to have you back. And yeah, just thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Mwah.
Mwah.